Free Negro Heads of Families in the United States, 1830, by Carter G. Woodson. Contents. One, Introduction. 1. The origin of the free Negro, page 5. 2. Preventing the increase of the free Negroes. I think that would be 16. 3. The free Negro before the law, 21. 4. Economic achievement, 33. 5. Social distinctions, 34. I'm not sure about the Roman numerals now. Part 2. Heads of free Negro families by states, page 1 through 192. Alabama, page 1. Arkansas, page 2. Connecticut, page 2. Delaware, page 7. District of Columbia, page 16. Florida, page 21. Georgia, page 21. Illinois, page 23. Indiana, page 24. Kentucky, page 26. Louisiana, page 30. Maine, page 39. Maryland, page 40. Massachusetts, page 67. Michigan Territory, page 73. Mississippi, page 73. Missouri, page 73. New Hampshire, page 74. New Jersey, page 74. New York, page 84. North Carolina, page 110. Ohio, page 123. Pennsylvania, page 130. Rhode Island, page 153. South Carolina, page 155. Tennessee, page 159. Vermont, page 162. Virginia, page 163. Part 3, Index, page 193. Introduction. Part 1, The Origin of the Free Negro. Inasmuch as the Constitution of the United States provided that representation in the House of Representatives should be apportioned according to the population, including all free persons except Indians not taxed, and 3/5 of all other persons. The census records of the Negroes, although differing a little from those of the other elements of the population, were generally made. The data with respect to the slave and free colored population increased from census to census in the proportion as the schedules became more elaborate. By 1850, moreover, the statistics returned for the free colored population were about as much detailed as those for whites. However, fewer inquiries were made with respect to the slave population. Most of these distinctions in taking the census passed away with the abolition of slavery. Prior to 1790, it was most impossible to figure out exactly how many Negroes were slaves and how many were free. In fact, we do not yet know how many Negroes were actually imported as slaves. According to Carey, the total number up to 1,808 aggregated about 340,000. Others believed that there were brought in probably as many 400,000. Better estimates are impossible here because of the variation in the annual importation as a result of many influences. From 1760 to 1770, there was a decided increase in the number brought in. From 1770 to 1790, however, when the spirit of freedom was strong as a result of the struggle for the rights of man during the American Revolution, this number decreased. After it was decided by the framers of the Constitution in 1787 that the slave trade should be prohibited after 1808, several of the southern states, feeling that they were dependent upon slave labor, imported as many as possible during the period immediately preceding that date. There were 757,881 Negroes in the United States in 1790, and 59,557 of these were free. Some of the Negroes early reported as slaves, however, never had such a status. At least a few of the first Negroes brought to this country were indentured servants like white persons of this class imported here during the beginnings of the colonies. J. H. Russell expresses this opinion in his Free Negro in Virginia. Such Negroes, like the white indentured servants, became free at the expiration of their term of service, took up land, and in some cases became employers of indentured servants and slaveholders themselves. It is highly probable that one of the 20 Negroes brought to Jamestown in 1619 became a slaveholder. The higher status of the free Negro is well attested by the fact that although the colonies had special enactments protecting slave property and providing special codes and tribunals for this for this element of the population, they at the same time recognized free persons of color. After the middle of the century, however, it was difficult for an African immigrant to escape being reduced to slavery. The period in which it was possible for Negroes to come as servants and later acquire freedom terminated near the end of the 17th century. The free Negro population thereafter found recruits only from children born of free Negro parents, mulatto children born of free Negro mothers, mulatto children born of white servants or free white women, children of free Negro and Indian mixed parentage, and manumitted slaves. Of the children born of free Negro parents, there was a steady increase. This, of course, depended on some extent This, of course, depended to some extent upon the increase of the number of Negroes of this status. During the 17th century, there were not many free Negroes in the colonies, and when the change in the attitude of the whites reduced the number of free Negro recruits from the slave population, there was not much of a prospect for an unusual increase in the number of children born of free Negro parents. Yet, as there was observed the Roman law to effect that the child followed the condition of the mother, this source of increase was the steady factor. The children of white men by free Negro mothers contributed much to the increase in this population. Coming from Europe without their wives, some white men, following the promptings of their nature, cohabited with Indian and Negro women. Such mothers, too, might be more inclined to produce offspring when supported and protected by the fathers, and evidence of this is not wanting. The history of the colonies, especially that of Virginia and Maryland, gives numerous instances of this sort. In the course of time, however, lustful white men found it more convenient to purchase slave women whom they could compel to appease their animal passions. There were also mulatto children born of white women servants and free white women. In the absence of social distinctions with respect to race, the distinction as to economic condition obtained. The white servant woman or free white woman, suffering from the same poverty and discrimination as Negro women during the early colonial period, intermingled with Negro men who were sometimes in a better position to support them than men of their own race. This custom endured for generations in spite of penalties which often meant the imposition of a fine, the reduction to servitude of the responsible parents, and the apprenticeship of servitude of the offspring. Seeing footnote. Children born of free Negro and Indian parentage also became a contributing factor. Exactly how much, however, can never be determined until the extent of the miscegenation between the Negroes and the Indians has been scientifically studied. It is known, however, that some Indians did settle among free Negroes, and there were cases of Negro fugitive slaves who were welcomed by the Indians. Notice had to be taken of this tendency, for such offspring often became a burden to the public. They were bound out as apprentices, as in the case of free mulatto children. Even during the apprenticeship, however, they were always regarded as free Negro population, although their liberty was decidedly restricted because they had no visible means of support. In view of the fact that we find the situation of today so different from that of the early colonial period, we should probably support these assertions with cases and evidence taken from the laws of the colonies. In Maryland, for example, the preamble of the law covering the case states thus exactly what the situation was. Rereading. In Maryland, for example, the preamble of the law covering the case states thus exactly what the situation was. And forasmuch as, in quotes, and forasmuch as divers freeborn English women, I think that should be diverse, repeating, end quote, and forasmuch as diverse freeborn English women, forgetful of their free condition, and to the disgrace of our nation, do intermarry with Negro slaves, by which also diverse suits may arise, touching the issue of such women, and a great damage doth befall the master of such Negroes, for preservation whereof, for deterring such freeborn women from such shameful matches, be it enacted, that whatsoever freeborn woman shall intermarry with any slave from and after the last day of the present assembly shall serve the master of such slave during the life of her husband, and that all the issues of such freeborn women so married shall be slaves as their fathers were. And be it further enacted that all the issues of English or other freeborn women that have already married Negroes shall serve the master of their parents till they be 30 years of age and no longer. According to A.J. Calhoun, however, all planters of Maryland did not manifest so much ire because of this custom among indentured servants. Planters, said he, quote, sometimes married white women servants to Negroes in order to transform the Negroes and their offspring into slaves, end quote. This was in violation of the ancient unwritten law that the children of a free woman, the father being a slave, follow the status of their mother and are free. This custom gave rise to an interesting case, quote, Irish Nell, end quote. One of the servants sent to Maryland by Lord Baltimore was sold by him to a planter who had come from England. Following the custom of other masters who held white women as servants, the planter soon married her to a Negro named Butler to produce slaves. Upon hearing this, Baltimore used his influence to have the law repealed. But the abrogation of it was construed by the Court of Appeals not to have any effect on the status of her offspring almost a century later, when William and Mary Butler sued for their freedom on the ground that they descended from this white woman. The provincial court had granted them freedom, but in this decision, the Court of Appeals reversed the lower tribunal on the ground that, quote, Irish Nell, unquote, was a slave before the measure repealing the act had been passed. This case came up again in 1787 when Mary, the daughter of William and Mary Butler, petitioned the state for freedom. Both tribunals then decided to grant this petition. The Act of Repeal of 1681, therefore, is self-explanatory. The preamble reads, "Forasmuch as diverse freeborn English or white women, sometimes by the investigation, sometimes rereading, quote, forasmuch as diverse freeborn English or white women, sometimes by the instigation, procurement, or connivance of their masters, mistresses, or dames, and always to the satisfaction of their lascivious and lustful desires, and to the disgrace not only of the English, but also of many other Christian nations, do intermarry with Negroes and slaves, by which means diverse inconveniences, controversies, and suits may arise, touching the issue or children of such freeborn women aforesaid, for the prevention whereof for the future be it enacted. That if the marriage of any woman servant with any slave shall take place by the procurement of permission of the master, such woman and her issue shall be free. It enacted a penalty by fine on the master or mistress and on the person joining the parties in marriage. The effect of this law was merely to prevent masters from prostituting white women to an economic purpose. It did not prevent the miscegenation of the two races. McCormick says, Quote, mingling of the races in Maryland continued during the 18th century in spite of all laws against it. Preventing marriages of white servants with slaves only led to a greater social evil, which caused a reaction of public sentiment against the servant. Masters and society in general were burdened with the care of illegitimate mulatto children, and it became necessary to frame laws compelling the guilty parties to reimburse the masters for the maintenance of these unfortunate waifs. To remedy this laws, to remedy this, laws were passed in 1715 and 1717 to reduce to the status of a servant for 7 years any white man or white woman who cohabitated with any Negro, free or slave. Their children were made servants for 31 years. A black thus concerned was reduced to slavery for life, and the maintenance of the bastard children of women servants was made incumbent upon masters. If the father of an illegitimate child could be discovered, he would have to support his offspring. If not, this duty fell upon the mother, who had to discharge it by servitude or otherwise. As what had been done to prevent the admixture was not sufficient, the Maryland General Assembly took further action in 1728, making the provisions more stringent. Virginia, which faced the same problem, did not lag far behind Maryland. In 1630, the governor and council in court ordered Hugh Davis to be soundly whipped before an assembly of Negroes and others for abusing himself, to the dishonor of God and shame of a Christian, by defiling his body in lying with a Negro, a guilt which he was to acknowledge next Sabbath day. In 1662, the colony imposed double fines for fornication with a Negro, but did not restrict intermarriage until 1691. The words of the preamble give the reasons for this action, saying, quote, and for the prevention of that abominable mixture and spurious issue which hereafter may increase in this dominion, as well by Negroes, mulattoes, and Indians intermarrying with English or other white women, as by their unlawful accompanying with one another. Be it enacted by the authority aforesaid, and it is hereby enacted, that for the time to come, whatsoever English or other white man or woman being free shall intermarry with a Negro, mulatto, or Indian man or woman, bond or free, shall within 3 months after such marriage be banished and removed from this dominion forever, and that the justices of each respective county within this dominion make it their particular care that this act be put in effectual execution. Unquote. If any free English woman should have a bastard child by any Negro or mulatto, she should pay the sum of 15 pounds sterling within 1 month after such bastard child should be born, to the church wardens of the parish where she should be delivered of such child. And in default of such payment, she should be taken into the possession of the said church wardens and disposed of for 5 years. And such bastard child should be bound out as a servant by the church wardens until he or she should attain the age of 30 years. And in case such English women that should have such bastard child be a servant, she should be sold by the church wardens, parenthesis, after her time is expired, that she ought by law to serve her master, in parenthesis, for 5 years, and the money she should be sold for divided as before appointed, and the child should serve as aforesaid. It was further provided in 1753 that if any woman servant should have a bastard child by a Negro or mulatto over and above the year's service due to her master or owner, she should immediately upon the expiration of her time to her then present master or owner pay down to the church wardens of the parish wherein such child should be born for the use of the said parish, 15 pounds current money of Virginia, or be sold for 5 years to the use aforesaid. And if a free Christian white woman should have such bastard child by a Negro or mulatto, for every such offense she should within 1 month after her delivery of such bastard child pay to the church wardens for the time being of the parish wherein such child should be born for the use of the said parish, 15 pounds current money of Virginia, or be by them sold for 5 years to the use aforesaid. And in both the said cases, the church wardens should bind the said child to be a servant until it should be 31 years of age. And for a further prevention of that abominable mixture and the spurious issue which may hereafter increase in this his Majesty's colony and dominion, as well by English and other white men and women intermarrying with Negroes or mulattoes, as by their unlawful coition with them, it was enacted that whatsoever English or other white man or woman being free should intermarry with a Negro or mulatto man or woman, bond or free, should, by judgment of the county court, be committed to prison, and there remain during the space of 6 months without bail or main prize, and should forfeit and pay 10 pounds current money of Virginia to the use of the parish as aforesaid. It was further enacted that no minister of the Church of England or other minister or person whatsoever within that colony and dominion should thereafter presume to marry a white man with a Negro or mulatto woman, or to marry a white woman with a Negro or mulatto man, upon paying of forfeiting and paying for every such marriage the sum of 10,000 pounds of tobacco. It developed, however, that these laws did not meet all requirements, for there were in subsequent years so many illegitimate children born of such mothers that they became a public charge and had to be bound out. In making more stringent regulations for servants and slaves, North Carolina provided in 1715 that if a white servant woman had a child by a Negro, mulatto, or Indian, she must serve her master 2 years extra and should pay to the church wardens immediately on the expiration of that time 6 pounds for the use of the parish, or be sold 4 years for the use aforesaid. A clergyman found guilty of officiating at such a marriage should be fined 50 pounds. This law, according to John Spencer Bassett, did not succeed in preventing such unions. 2 ministers were indicated within 2 years for performing such a marriage ceremony. Quote, in one case, the suit was dropped In the other case, the clergyman went before the Chief Justice and confessed, as it seems, of his own accord. In 1727, a white woman was indicted in the general court because she had left her husband and was cohabiting with a Negro slave. So far as general looseness was concerned, this law of 1715 had no force. End quote. By the law of 1741, therefore, the colony endeavored to prevent what the General Assembly called that abominable mixture and spurious issue, which hereafter may increase in this government by white men and women intermarrying with Indians, Negroes, Mustees, or mulattoes. It was enacted that if any man or woman being free should intermarry with an Indian, Negro, Mustee, or mulatto man or woman, or any person of mixed blood, to the third generation, bond or free, he should by judgment of the county court forfeit and pay the sum of £50 proclamation money to the use of the parish. It was also provided that if any white servant woman should during the time of her servitude be delivered of a child begotten by any Negro, mulatto, or Indian, such servant over and above the time she was by this act to serve her master or owner for such offense, should be sold by the church wardens of the parish for 2 years after the time by indenture or otherwise had expired. The miscegenation of the whites and blacks extended so widely that it became a matter of concern to the colonies farther north, where the Negro population was not considerable. Seeking also to prevent this spurious mixed issue, Massachusetts enacted in 1705 that a Negro or mulatto man committing fornication with an English woman or a woman of any other Christian nation should be sold out of the province. An English man or man of any other Christian nation committing fornication with a Negro or mulatto woman should be whipped and the woman sold out of the province. None of Her Majesty's English or Scottish subjects, nor of any other Christian nation within that province, should contract matrimony with any Negro or mulatto under a penalty imposed on the person joining them in marriage. No master should unreasonably deny marriage to his Negro with one of the same nation, any law, usage, or custom to the contrary notwithstanding. There was much of such contact between the white servants and the Negroes in Pennsylvania, where the number of the latter greatly increased during the first quarter of the 19th century. Turner says a white servant was indicted for this offense in Sussex County in 1677, and a tract of land there bore the name of Mulatto Hall. According to the same writer, Chester County seemed to have a large number of these cases and laid down the principle that such admixture should be prohibited. Referring to a white man, a community complained that he, contrary to his master's consent, hath got with child a certain mulatto woman called Swart Anna. David Lewis, constable of Haverford, Haverford, returned a Negro man a Negro man of his, and a white woman for being a bastard child. The Negro said she enticed him and promised him to marry him. She, being examined, confessed the same. The court ordered that she shall receive 21 lashes on her bare back, and the court ordered the Negro never more to meddle with any white woman more upon pain of his life. Advertising for Richard Moulson in Philadelphia in 1720, his master said, quote, "He is in company with a white woman named Mary, who is supposed now goes for his wife, and a white man named Garrett Choice, and Jane his wife, which said white people are servants to some neighbors of said Richard Tilghman," end quote. In 1722, a woman was punished for abetting a clandestine marriage between a white woman and a Negro. In the Pennsylvania Gazette, June 1, 1749, appeared the notice of the departure of Isaac Cromwell, a mulatto, who ran away with an English servant woman named Anne Green. The Assembly, therefore, upon a petition from inhabitants inveighing against this custom, enacted a prohibitory law in 1725. This law provided that no minister, pastor, or magistrate, or other person whatsoever who, according to the laws of that province, usually joining people in marriage, should upon any pretense whatever join in marriage any Negro with any white person on the penalty of £100. And it was further enacted that if any white man or woman should cohabit or dwell with any Negro under pretense of being married, such white man or woman should be put out to service as above directed until they come to the age of 31 years. And if any free Negro man or woman should intermarry with a white man or woman, such Negro should become a slave during life, to be sold by order of the justice of the quarter sessions of the respective county. And if any free Negro man or woman should commit fornication or adultery with any white man or woman, such Negro or Negroes should be sold as a servant for 7 years, and the white man or woman should be punished as the law directs in cases of adultery or fornication. This law seemed to have very little effect on the miscegenation of the races in certain parts. In Chester County, according to the records of 1780, mulattoes constituted 1/5 of Negro population. Furthermore, that very year, when the Senate of Pennsylvania had grown sufficiently liberal to provide for gradual emancipation, the law against the mingling of the races was repealed. Mixed marriages thereafter became common as the whites and the blacks, in the light of the American Revolution, realized liberty in its full meaning. Thomas Brannigan said in 1805, "There are many, very many blacks who begin to feel themselves consequential, will not be satisfied unless they get white women for wives, and are likewise exceedingly impertinent to white people in low circumstances. I solemnly swear I have seen more white women married to and deluded through the arts of seduction by Negroes in 1 year in Philadelphia than for 8 years I was visiting West Indies and the Southern States. I know a black man who seduced a young white girl, who soon after married him and died with a broken heart. On her death, he said that he would not disgrace himself to have a Negro wife, and acted accordingly, for he soon after married a white woman. There are perhaps hundreds of white women thus fascinated by black men in this city, and there are thousands of black children by them at present. A reaction against this custom therefore set in during the first decade of the 19th century when fugitives in the rough were rushing to that state and, and culminated in an actual campaign against it by 1820. That year, a petition from Greene County said that many Negroes had settled in Pennsylvania and had been able to seduce into marriage the minor children of the white inhabitants. This county therefore asked that these marriages be made an offense against the laws of the state. Such a marriage was the cause of a riot in Columbia in 1834, and in 1838, the members of the Constitutional Convention engaged in a heated discussion of the custom. Petitions were frequently sent to the legislature asking that this admixture be penalized by law, but no such action was ever taken. Relying upon public opinion, however, the advocates of racial integrity practically succeeded. Marriages of whites and blacks eventually became so odious that they led to disturbances, as in the case of the riot of 1849, one of the causes of which was that a white man was living with a Negro wife. This was almost ineffective, however, in the prevention of race admixture. Clandestine intermingling went on and tended to increase in enormous proportions. The conclusive proof of this is that in 1860, mulattoes constituted 1/3 of the Negro population of Pennsylvania. In some of the slave states, it later became a capital offense for a Negro man to cohabit with a white woman. Ph.D., who toured this country from 1833 to 1834, however, doubted that such laws were enforced. Quote, "A man," end quote, said he, quote, "was hanged not long ago for this crime at New Orleans. The partner of his guilt, his master's daughter, endeavored to save his life by avowing that she alone was to blame. She died shortly after his execution," end quote. With the white man and the Negro woman, the situation was different. A sister of President Madison once said to the Reverend George Byrne, then a Presbyterian minister in Virginia, quote, "We Southern ladies are "We Southern ladies are complimented with the name of wives, but we are only the mistresses of Seraglios," end quote. The masters of the female slaves, however, were not always the only persons of loose morals. Many women of color were also prostituted to the purpose of young white men and overseers. Goodell reports a well-authenticated account of a respectable, quote, Christian lady, end quote, at the South, who kept a handsome mulatto female for the use of her genteel son, as a method of deterring him, as she said, from indiscriminate and vulgar indulgences. Harriet Martineau discovered a young white man who, on visiting a Southern lady, became insanely enamored of her intelligent quadroon maid. He sought to purchase her, but the owner refused to sell the slave because of her unusual worth. The young white man persisted in trying to effect this purchase and finally informed her owner that he could not live without this attractive slave. Thereupon, the white lady sold the woman of color to satisfy the lust of her friend. The accomplishment of this task of preventing the increase of the free Negroes, therefore, was not easy. In the first place, so many persons of color had risen to positions of usefulness among progressive people and had formed connections with them that drastic action was both inexpedient, and undesirable. Exceptions to the hard and fast rules of caste were often made to relieve the people of color. The miscegenation of the races in the South, and especially in large cities like Charleston and New Orleans, moreover, had gone to the extent that from these centers eventually went, as they do now, a large number of quadroons and octoroons who elsewhere crossed over to the other race. And that ends my reading of The Origin of the Free Negro. The next time I read, it will be Preventing the Increase. It will be part 2 of the introduction, Preventing the Increase of the Free Negroes. Peace and love, Lady T. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I am going to post the link to this PDF file. And I'm going to put it in, I'll go back and edit and put it in all of the, this should be it. And I will also go back and put it in the description each time that I read. I'll put the PDF file. I'm sure that I mispronounced some words that I was not familiar with. And I am definitely open for all enlightenment and correct pronunciations. I am also hoping to get some more readers, people who are willing to read, and I will host it and scroll for you, or you can, if you're doing the reading from a laptop, I can just share your screen as I understand, and you can scroll for yourself if anyone is interested in reading. And with that, I will say peace and love. I hope that someone can benefit from these readings, as that is my specific goal. Peace and love.